We're live from Sales HQ. I'm Vince Beese, your host and the founder here at Sales HQ. And my guest for this episode is Grant Kitching.
That's it.
Not Kitchen.
Not Kitchen.
So I've done that mistake. Kitching.
That's okay. It happens.
Let's start off with what is Sales HQ? What is this phenomenon that's striking the Raleigh area and bringing everybody to their knees? Sales HQ is the first of its kind co-selling community specifically for high-performing sellers and sales teams. Basically, we're curing for remote sales isolation, demotivation. We're bringing everybody together on a traditional type of sales floor and giving them opportunity to collaborate and build that energy of a high-energy floor.
It's a great concept.
Doing it here first in Raleigh. If you want more information about that, go to saleshq.co. So it's not com. I couldn't get the com, so it's saleshq.co. That's what Sales HQ is. Check it out when you get a chance. But more importantly, Grant, known each other for a while. I've known a lot about you. But tell our audience, what are you up to these days?
The last 6 years, I have been with
6 years. Is it
6 years? It's how time flies.
I remember when you were talking about this.
I know how time flies. But 6 years ago, I joined Jess Lipson over at Real Magic, and we basically launched our first product, Levitate. And Levitate is a product that helps. We are small, medium business focused. So to many out there who do enterprise SaaS, we look a bit like an exotic plant in that we do SMB, but we
exotic plant.
Yeah, we're exotic. It's but a need, and so we help small medium businesses more effectively stay top of mind and keep in touch with their networks, with all their referral partners. With the goal of helping them drive more business. And so. It's been 6 years. We just hit north of 6,000 customers.
Oh, wow.
And it's very exciting. And it's been quite the wild ride.
You're the CRO?
I'm the CRO, yes.
Founding CRO.
Founding CRO, pre-revenue, pre-beta, all that fun stuff, yes. Had I've known, Jess and I always talk how rare these companies are that get to our stage.
Yes,
we were like,
very rare.
Yeah. Would we have done this? But yes, it's been a fun journey.
And congratulations on this current run. I know it's not over and it's going to still go strong, but congratulations. You're part of this local group here that's part of ShareFile Citrix, the Raleigh Durham Sales Mafia group. So that's right. Another feather in your cap.
Yeah.
I want to get to this one question I asked my guests early on, which is I often find that people don't start a career in sales or sales leadership on purpose.
No.
They typically kind of fall into it, find a natural entryway and go for it. Curious, what's your story? How did you get involved in sales?
It's quite hilarious. I'll go back. I'll go back to the beginning, but I won't make it too drawn out. But I tell everyone I'm from Texas. That's my joke. But originally from South Africa, and I grew up like I was a geek. It's like my first computer I got by the time I was 13, I think. And if you're in the US and Vince, you may remember the Commodore 64.
Yeah, of course.
There was the ZX Spectrum 48K, and 48K means 48K of memory. That was it. I'm getting to, but I'm going to fast forward beyond that. So anyway,
you're trying to prove your point.
Yeah, I went to university. I'm just a computer guy. I did computer science, physics, and I started my career at IBM in Johannesburg, and I was doing coding and consulting. And I came here in it was January of '96. And never seen snow. And came into, if you were here in January '96 in Research Triangle Park, one of the worst snowstorms in history.
Oh, that's right.
That was my entrance into the US. So sitting in a corporate apartment, for the first 4 days on my own, kind of figuring out, what am I doing here? One of those things where you just, that comfort zone moment where you're like, man. But I started off, doing consulting and training and just traveling around the US, training on some mainframe product. And then I found my way into product management. So half my career has been as a product manager. It kind of makes me a bit of a different, maybe CRO in the way that I think about stuff and approach stuff. But it was about, I'll tell you now, it gets real funny, because it was probably about when the mortgage crisis was really hitting, which you may remember too, Vince, was about 2008, 2009. And I'd taken a bit of a deviation. I was working for a company. I was really intrigued by the business model where they did this fiber to the home approach, where they got an easement and they had service providers right on the fiber. So I was deeply intrigued by it. But, we're going through one of those stages. It's a capital heavy business. And we're trying to get funding, and you know the deal, funding's here and there, and it's not going so well, and we're trying to figure it out. And my CEO walked over to me one day. He was this crazy guy, and he said, "Grant, I don't need a product manager, I need a sales guy." He said, "Grant, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to take your salary, I'm going to have it, so half salary, and the rest is going to be commission.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to do it, it's okay. You can go today." And at that stage, it was the mortgage
sink or
crisis.
swim.
There wasn't much going on out there. That was my foray into sales. Was like, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this out. And I've always been a competitive guy. I grew up a twin. Still am a twin, I should say. He's back in South Africa. He's the shorter one that's not as good looking as me. But that kind of got that competitive streak in me where, you get some twins, they bond. But we were more competitive. Boy, twins are competitive. And, that's where the competitive streak came out, where I said, I can do this. I'm going to sell. And the rest is history,
So how did you do in that first sales opportunity? Was it an individual contributor role, I assume?
Yeah, it was an IC role. Okay. And very interesting. I think in one of the podcasts I saw you were speaking about door-to-door. There was an element of door-to-door, which was deeply intriguing. And this door-to-door, some of it involved mobile home parks. And if you've ever done door-to-door, it's interesting. If you've done door-to-door in mobile home parks, it gets even more interesting.
I bet it does.
It can get fun. But there was an element of that. And this guy and I named Jack, we figured out.
Did you even knock on the door? You just yell, "Hey!"
Yeah, it's like, hey, and you're barking, you back off,
exactly,
based on the depth of the bark. But this guy, Jack, and I figured out this model of approaching REITs, real estate investment trusts, who own a lot of communities, apartment communities, mobile home communities. And we figured out how to kind of just get these broad umbrella enterprise sales. And it took off. And in those first years, I made more money than I ever did in a few years as a product manager. And then I knew that this is going to be fun, that I can do this. But that was the entrance.
Well, it's good you took the risk.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you didn't have a choice, though. It was either that or being unemployed. So it's kind of like forced into sales.
Exactly.
That'd be your title, forced into sales.
Exactly.
And still conquering.
Exactly.
So you got the taste for an uncapped amount of being able to have an uncapped salary or compensation. That probably was something that was attractive as well.
That was super attractive. I think, I always talk to my team about, just having finances and having means, and the fact that money is not going to make you happy, but money can make you happier, in that it allows you to do things that you weren't able to do before and just have comforts that you didn't. And so that was my first, as I said, the first kind of taste of it. I'm like, this is kind of cool. I think I can do this, and the rest is history.
So you go to an individual contributor role. How did you then get into sales leadership?
Yeah, so that's interesting because that company, went through its gyrations. We got acquired, and capital heavy companies with low gross margin. When you get acquired, it's make a ton of money, And so that happened, and that was probably around, when was it? Early 2012, and I was trying to figure out the next thing. And I had a friend, a real good friend, Brian, and he said to me, there are these guys, and I'm surprised I never heard about them, but they're these guys. There's this guy, Jesse Lipson, and he's doing the share file thing along with Ed Sheely, who was the VP of sales. You may have heard Ed's name. And he said, they just got acquired by Citrix. And he said, you should talk to them. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of more a pre-acquisition guy. I want to make, it's and I met up with them, and, they were looking for some leadership roles, and meeting up with Ed. I didn't get to meet with Jess initially, but meeting up with Ed, I was like, and seeing what Jess and Ed were doing, with SMB outbound, which is SMB outbound is normally two words that don't go together.
Yep.
It's not easy. You normally got PLG, product-led growth motions, driving SMB. But seeing what they did was just spectacular. And I said, if I go into a simple leadership role here, I actually took a step back. I can learn a ton more from these guys in just taking a step back than I think I could ever anywhere else. And that was the big change for me, was getting connected there.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
That's smart. You followed the leadership. You believed in them. You trusted them. You saw their vision, and you felt you could learn something from them. So you took the chance, right?
Absolutely. And just, I think also the culture,
Yeah.
and just the calm that I saw in, Ed wasn't calm. It was
Jess is
fun, but Jess, just the calm, kind of just the data-driven approach,
Yeah.
The highly structured approach, not cutting corners, always doing the right thing, was just what I wanted to be a part of, because that's important.
Well, let's follow up on something you said, which I think is extremely important and sometimes overlooked, which is culture. And specifically, not just company culture, but there's such thing as sales culture, right? And I'm sure you're a firm believer in that. You've done certain things. What is it that you do when you come in a leadership role to set the right sales culture? Do you have a certain methodology or process that you kind of adhere to?
Yeah. And I think it's the very first thing that defines, I think, a culture is it's not a matter of there could be many things out there, you look at the ping pong tables, you look at all the the kegerator and all that. That is not culture. I think what defines the very first thing about a culture is you got to establish a team that is well trained and is put in a position to be successful. Okay? Because if they're not trained, if they're not in a position to be successful, nothing else matters. And there's a table stakes of culture for me, which is always do the right thing when no one's looking. That's kind of table stakes. If you don't have that, it's not a culture. It's not even, there's no foundational Maslow's concept. But I think for me, the very big start is a solid culture starts when you have a team that is being put in a position to be successful, and the precursor to that is what training are you delivering? There's of course things like product market fit, but as a sales org, it's having a first class training program where there are managers who care about the development of their team. And when we do stuff like that and get people to be successful and feel like they can do things, the sky's the limit.
So training for you, I'm sure it's evolved over time, but do your current managers also do the training, or do you have a separate organization that's responsible for onboarding and training?
No, we have the managers do the training, and I think it's
because that's a question that people say, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't be good at everything as a leader, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, and I think it's a matter of as you scale, do you have a separate team that takes on onboarding and training? I really think it's an important function for the managers to keep, to do themselves, because they are the ones who will be managing. They are the ones who will be coaching, and having them right in there at the ground floor. And, when they do their training, it's not just about them training the reps. It's also about them building rapport. And so we invest in, a decent amount in them, to become, can you train? Can you coach? And that is kind of the table stakes stuff that I think we need to keep the managers at that level. I think it's important.
Yeah, I just hear so many startups, they don't even have an onboarding, let alone training. And it's sink or swim for the salesperson, and it takes a certain breed to be able to come at early stage startup in that sort of environment. But I like your approach a lot better, where you're setting the stage of setting them up for success as opposed to setting them up for failure, right?
You have to. Yes.
And so I assume that's that philosophy, that strategy probably pertains to ongoing as well. I assume you have your top tier reps, you have your middle tier reps, you have your tier. I'm sure you're trying to constantly increase their skill levels and their success as well, right?
Yeah, it's all about just growing your building out your craft. And I was looking the other day, I was looking at owner.com, and I think they sell to restaurants, very similar SMB, and they have a very similar structure where it's like, I think, an old Brad over here that we just spoke to earlier was, just 15-5 had it to just be the very best that you can be. So there's that personal side that I look for and how we can help our employees just be the very best that they can be. And it comes to certain principles of mine that I spoke about with you earlier. But, throughout, the training never stops. The learning never stops. Like, when you come in with us as an SDR, it is constant. It is daily, weekly. When you become an AE, it is pretty extensive. It is deep. We do a ton of mock demos, all that kind of fun stuff. But I'd rather go just totally overboard on the training, overtrain. Now, we don't overthink.
Yep.
We're putting you in like reps, So you come in and you're onboarding for 5 days, and then I'm like, okay, it's time to get on the phones. That's kind of the bias to action that we have, is because.
And you're going to learn a lot.
yeah. It's you learn more also because you got to have the blend. There's only so much theory you can consume before it gets overwhelming.
Yep.
So you're on the phone, and then it's a blend of you're on the phone, train, on the phone, train, but this constant injection of the right training at the right time in like a golf swing type mode, where it's the worst thing you can do is to tell a rep to fix 6 things.
Yep.
So what's the top thing? 1 thing.
Yep.
Fix that. Next thing. Fix that. Next thing.
Yep.
It's kind of the methodology.
Salespeople having success for a long period of time, not just in different sprints, but long period of time. I believe, and I think we started talking about this, like there's some ownership as a salesperson you have to take to invest into your career, invest into your skill set. And that's this commitment to lifelong learning.
Yes.
Right? I know you're a big proponent of that for yourself.
Yes.
You take down new challenges, you had to learn, you had to continue to push yourself. What advice can you give to specifically maybe younger sales or less experienced sellers out there of this commitment to lifelong learning and why it's so important?
I think it's kind of, again, it's part of the fabric of what I think makes just someone who is, deeply successful in that. I've been around a while, and like, the minute I stop learning will be that's the moment my heart stops beating. Like, you have to keep learning and growing. And the minute you stop doing that, you stop developing, whether it be on your sales craft. But I think, more specifically, like, it's also on like, just understanding like, your intrinsic motivators as a person. And managers, like, as part of their job, like, to pull that out, to figure out what are your intrinsic motivators. But I think without that kind of foundation, like, for many, it's when you're young, you think you know a lot, like I was like that. I was like, I know everything, like, but over time, you get to discover that you don't know everything. And if you are able to get into that model of like, just, I am going to keep learning. I'm going to keep understanding not just my sales methodologies. Yep. Am I a pro at challenger sale? Am I a pro at spin selling? That's more outbound. But do I understand the psychology of sales? Cialdini's influence principles. And like, that's the type of stuff where it's like, if you keep investing there, I think you keep learning. You keep being relentlessly, I think it's kind of a buzzword, but it's an important word, curious about yourself, about your prospects. You will win. The minute you think you know too much, you start talking. Prospects stop listening, and your given close rate or your win rate dies.
Yeah. I think curiosity to me is a characteristic that you must have in sales. And I find that salespeople that aren't curious don't ask the right questions or the timely questions or dig deeper. And I'm sorry, but I don't know if we can teach to that. So to me is, what I mean? Like, there's certain things that you can up level, you can teach people, but it's hard instinctively to help someone become more curious.
It is.
It's either you are or you aren't. And it leads to what you're talking about, which is continuous learning. You believe in it because you do it. But I don't think most people, I shouldn't say most, some people don't think that way. I know this thing, I'm selling this thing, I'm having success, I'm good, right?
Yeah.
So that's a hard thing to kind of up level someone on, right?
It is. And I think, it goes down to there's, what I try and pull out of people a lot, just understanding them is there is aptitude and there's attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certain things that, you can learn and influence your attitude and like grow. And then there's aptitude. And that's kind of the stuff that you mentioned is if you don't have an aptitude for curiosity, positivity and grit, can you develop that over time? Yes. But sometimes it's not there.
No. So the question is, are you self-aware?
Yeah.
Do you realize that? Do you recognize it? Are you willing to do something about it?
Yeah.
That's the question, right?
Yeah.
If you're constantly getting feedback from your coach or your leader that, hey man, you missed opportunities to ask this question or that question or do this thing, and they're not picking up on it because they just don't see those signs, and we've got a problem there. But I'd say 95% of the people that you coach will see that and recognize that. I think in general, salespeople tend to be harder on themselves, quite frankly, than anyone else. They're the better ones, or they're the worst critics of themselves, right?
Yes.
They want to get better. They want that little push to get better, right? That goes to being gritty, being a hustler, right? Which is another critical thing.
Yes, and that's kind of one of the, in the interview process, we try to always pull these things out is, are there these tendencies? And I think lifelong learning is one thing. I think just in building out the startup from pre-revenue to where we are now is I think, and it's very similar in sales, is the element of grit. Mm-hmm. And I like the word grit. It's close to gravel. I like the word grit. Just because it unpacks a lot of things is like, if you have grit, I cannot say of someone they have grit if they're very negative all the time. Mm-hmm. Because the two don't go together. If you're negative all the time, your grit falls away, So when I see people who have grit, it sub-levels into a variety of important things that they have is number one, it's tenacity, kind of like sub-level grit. It's like, you just got to be tenacious, and that comes down to intrinsic motivators, is the sub-level of tenacity. And you work up tenacity into grit. The other one that's more of that aptitude than I think flavor is optimism. Is you got to be optimistic, and you get down in yourself. But if you're negative and it's we all struggle with negativity. It's such a beast when it gets hold of you, and I've been there, and it takes a while. It's one step to get into it, 4 steps to get out of it. It's tough for salespeople, and we have salespeople who are they're our best, and they fall into it, and it's the faster we can get them out of it, and get our people into optimistic, positive mindset where it's not everything is going to go my way, not everything about my life is going to be linear. Even though it appears, you look at all these startups like Slack, everything appears like an overnight success, but it's hard. Mm-hmm. And it's the same for them. I tell them in their career, it's you're going to have the good days, you're going to have the bad days. But if you're curious and you're optimistic and you're just committed to improving your art and your science, you're going to be okay.
It's interesting. Sales is hard, and there's a lot more no's than there are yeses. But when those yeses happen, it's magic.
Yeah. Exactly.
You don't remember the no's, you remember the yeses.
Yeah.
So you and I have been doing this long enough to know that, today was a shitty day, or that call was a shitty call, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter, because the next one or the next one or the next one's going to be that fabulous one. It's kind of like my golf game. For every 10 swings, I might have one good one. And that's the one that holds me and gives me promise to potentially play again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just that one smooth swing, but hit perfectly. That's what it feels like. It's the same thing in sales.
Yeah.
It's that one call, that one response, whatever it is, that brings you back in, right?
And it does. And it's part of our, it's part of our training, and just what we instill, into our team from a psychology perspective.
Yeah.
That if you're making 100 prospecting dials a day and you have with the decision maker a 16% connect rate, that means you're going to be having 16 conversations a day with the decision maker, let alone gatekeepers who are going to tell you no. You may talk to 50 GKs.
Yep.
And it's no, 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 no. But you're going to get through maybe with the 16% connect rate to 16 DMs, decision makers, and you may only book 2 demos.
Yep.
So what that means is 2 out of 16 are either call me back or they no's. And that's, as you said, that's the type of stuff where it's like just that. It's always the why.
Yep.
Big fan of Simon Sinek. Why?
Yeah,
It's just like, here is why we're doing this, and here's what's going to happen. And you're going to have days where you could have no appointments. 16 connects nothing. 16 connects nothing. But you could come back the next day, have 16 connect, and you book 5 appointments. It's not linear. Just keep being committed, keep learning, and number one, ask for help from your manager. Ask for help from your manager.
And, like I didn't get into sales by choice either, it just happened. But what I liked about sales.
How did you get into sales?
Oh, shit.
I want to interview the interviewer.
How did I get into sales? I actually responded to one of those ads back in the day that said something like, are you sports minded? Do you like, it was playing to people that are competitive and athletic. I'd say, I'd like to play sports, I don't know if athletic. And I went to this thing, it was an open casting thing. I walked in, and all of a sudden there's 50 people in this room, like, what the heck? And it ended up being like one of those vitamin scams.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I don't buy into this, but what they're trying to do, what they're trying to sell is this vision of independence and being your own boss and making your own way and having untapped income. It caught my attention. And so then I actually then responded to a second one, which was for advertising sales for a startup magazine in Washington, D.C., just getting off the ground. And this was door to door. So you had to come in, we were selling advertising to local businesses, and you had to go find an owner, walk in and do it. I didn't know if I wanted to do it. It was just something at the time I was trying to bide my time to get my next broadcasting gig. That's all. I just saw it as a means to make money now. Who cares? They're paying me a little bit of money and I can make commission on top of that. So I started doing it. It's like, I didn't take it serious. And I think because I didn't take it so serious, I wasn't hard on myself. And eventually I started closing deals. I'm like, this isn't that hard. Just walk up to these people, have a conversation. Either they buy into it or they don't.
Yeah.
And I move on.
Yeah.
I never took it personal. So I was like, I just fell into it and just became, I just always saw it, Grant, as like a conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
And it's either you need this thing or you don't need this thing.
It's interesting. There's something to be said for that balance of, you got to take it seriously, but if you take it too seriously, you come off as scripted, inauthentic because you're just so nervous.
Like there's only so much you can do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
At the end of
that's cool.
At the end of the day, if in discovery or whatever you do on your first call, if you're not going to solve a problem for them, if they don't have a problem that you can solve, then make a friend, but walk away. It's not going to happen. I don't care how good you think you are. It may happen, but then it will churn anyway because it should have never happened. That's my point. Like I think my instinct, my best trait about being into sales, by the way, how did we switch back to me? Are you is the fact that I'm honest, super, super honest about my opportunities. And that's why I always try to emphasize to the sales team, you don't need to have 20 opportunities. You just need to have good opportunities. And a good opportunity starts with a mutual fit. Do they have a problem? Can we solve that problem? If you can't answer that, and if that's not clear to them, it's not clear to us, then walk away. So go back to the advertising thing. Do you need more of an audience to walk in of these types of people? If you do, let's do a test and see if this works for you and bring in traffic to your store or shop or whatever it is. And that's what I learned just early on. I just broke down sales to be very simplistic. And I didn't, to your point, I didn't take it serious because I didn't think this was a career for me. So I didn't really care that much.
Yeah, it's a great.
Here we are 20-something years later.
I know.
And it's like golf in that you can make it a career, meaning you're never too old to do sales.
No,
never.
No, it keeps me young.
Right. Well, you joining startups is keeping you young too.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that. Yes. I think
Hopefully
the last 6 years has like 12.
You used to have hair down your shoulders and it's dark black, right?
No gray.
That's right. Well, we're getting close to wrapping up things here. I wanted to ask you one last question because I love the fact that in the last 2 opportunities you had, very vertical approach.
Yes.
I've always loved the vertical attack. I think it's a great way to go to market. So talk to us a little bit about your expertise and why you're such a big proponent of verticalization when it comes to go-to-market.
Yeah, and I think it's I think especially in SMB, it's super relevant, because SMB in itself is just so verticalized. You look at enterprise SaaS. The TAM is obviously not as huge because there's bigger deal sizes and just less TAM. But SMB it's a massive TAM, means total addressable market.
Yes.
And there are millions of SMBs out there, and I love them because it's the fuel of the economy.
Yep.
It's every person out there, that insurance agency owner, that HVAC operator, where it's like they got to make payroll every month. They've got families, and it's like they're just the fuel of the economy. But it's verticalized.
Yes.
Because think about it, it's a massive addressable market. But you've got attorneys, you've got insurance agency owners, you've got financial advisors, you've got HVAC operators, you've got plumbers, and I think it's just like there's these big vertical TAMs where I think if you're able to just build a model where number one, it's all about your salespeople showing domain expertise to the nth degree, where it's like you call that insurance agency owner up, and carriers are leaving Florida, and like if you're not verticalized, you can't have that convo, but you can call that guy up or gal who's right at that agency and say, in Florida, I heard about travelers.
Yep.
They're like, how do you know about my stuff, like what I'm going through? And I'm like, you probably just slammed trying to write business now and feeling underwater, but I get you.
Yep.
I get you. You really should look at this. And I think that's the beauty. You've got these big vertical markets that if you specialize in them, and just not just sales reps only, but you also build out, and here's the product guy in me, very, very strong vertical ecosystems where you integrate with their CRMs. You start to get involved in their associations, and that's the long game aspect.
Their trade shows that they go to, just be where they are, speak their language, and all that stuff becomes relevant.
Yeah, you use Vertafore as your AMS, or whatever it is, agency management system as an insurance guy, or it's like, and that over time you just build this very deep and defensible moat of knowledge and investment in that vertical. So your go-to-market in itself becomes a defense strategy, where it's just very hard to build up.
Do you separate your teams today by vertical?
Absolutely.
I mean, physically separate your teams by vertical.
Yes.
So they can hear each other and feed off each other.
Absolutely.
So that's great. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we've got kind of two master verticals, but the sub verticals under there, are very related, like insurance agencies, financial advisors, accountants, and we put everyone together so that we can always be learning from each other. But that's a key part of the learning is you don't just come in and learn sales skills. You got to come in and you got to learn the verticals.
Yes.
And how to speak. When you get that person on the phone, the deal. It's like, as I said, a 16% connect rate, and you may just, you got 16 convos on that day. Best case, maybe that's a good connect rate sometimes. You got that DM's attention. You got to get them in 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Or not, or you're toast.
Yep.
And you've got to have that hook, right out of the gate, especially with an outbound cold calling model. So that's why we verticalize, because we think it's a great defensible go-to-market way.
Man, I just think people are crazy. If they have the ability to verticalize, it's the best way to go to market. I'm biased, even in enterprise. We were talking about SMB, but enterprise just as much so, because again, it comes back to speaking their language, right? Whether your first conversation, your first email sent, the trade shows you go to, the events you go to, it's got to speak to their business. And I don't know, it's just well, I think we'll leave it there. I mean, gosh, I think we've given this audience enough for free. We're not charging anything.
No, we should. You should. You should. Yes.
Hey man, thanks for coming on. It's great seeing you again. Please don't be a stranger around here.
No, it's really great what you're doing with SalesHQ. I'm a big fan of this, and just the risk that you're taking. I think it's great for Raleigh and the community.
Yes.
And just a plug for Levitate, we're always hiring. So I'm looking for SDRs. Come find me. Come get me.
Oh, you shouldn't have said that, because I think you're going to get hit. Grant Kitching on LinkedIn. I guarantee is there a lot of Grant Kitchens on
not too many. There's a Grant Kitching over on the West Coast.
He's not the same.
And I compete with him for Google attention.
Yeah, Google email address and such.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely, Vince. Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Sales HQ. Till next time. Thank you.